Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Marvinizer Mastery Group. So glad to have you on. I just want to remind you, too, I know we're still in the infancy of this stage of the Marvinizer Mastery Group, but hey, there's a couple ways you can be utilizing this. One, I had someone tell me yesterday on Friday, that they use it and play it while they're on their way to a sales call. I know some people will use it at their sales meeting where they'll have all their salespeople in the room and play the whole segment. Or some people just like to look at the transcription that comes through and pick out the points that are applicable to them. But I think the main thing that I want everybody to make sure they're getting out of this is my 5 Ps. Preparation and practice provides peak performance. Preparation and practice provides peak performance. I want you to customize this information that I'm sharing with you and spend some time with some self-improvement. You know, how am I going to get better? Remember, we talked about attitude. What do I need to do to get better at my attitude? We talked about the greeting rapport, or there's some things there that I need to get better at. We talked about what our approach should be, and I'll remind you a little bit of that today. And then last week, we talked about that important transition between the greeting rapport and letting them know why you're here. Okay. So you have the greeting rapport, you have the verbal agenda that lets them know why you're there. And then we're going to be talking about today, making that transition from that verbal agenda into the question process. Because remember, you're not there to do an information dump. You're not there to do a show up and throw up, as I refer to it sometimes. Your whole role is to find out as quickly as you can if there's a need for the products and services that you're there to talk about. I've said many, many times, this is not a customer yet. Okay? This is not even a prospect yet. I refer to that initial meeting that you have. It's a suspect. Have you seen those movies back in the day? They'd say, round up all the usual suspects and bring them in for what? Questioning. They didn't say bring them in and put them in jail or bring them in and book. No, the first thing they wanted to do was ask them some questions to find out, are they innocent or are they guilty? And then a couple of things would happen. Sometime they'd go, we're going to have to hold you for a little while. Or sometime they'd go, we're going to let you go. Or sometime we're going to go, hey, book him, the guy's guilty. So yeah, it's amazing if you ask the right questions, they will tell you exactly what you need to do with that suspect. In other words, does the suspect become a prospect and then eventually become a customer relationship? Or does the suspect just become a customer relationship that maybe somewhere down the road becomes what? A referral source. Or maybe even a customer down the way. So look at them as a suspect. That means your mindset is already thinking, if they're a suspect, I got to ask them some questions first. So just want to kind of give you a little feel for what this morning is going to look like. We all know that this time goes real fast. We have that segment titled Ask Marvin Anything. And I love it when the ask ties in with what I talked about the week prior. And I already told you what we talked about last week, and that's that verbal agenda. So here's the question that was in the Ask the Marvinizer Anything segment. The question was this, and it makes sense. What if you don't get a chance to control that transition? Because remember we talked about there's a transitional period between that connection you're making into the verbal agenda. You got to control that transition, because if you don't control it, they will. And the question was, well, what if they control that transition? So maybe you're talking about the Cavs game last night and the customer interrupts and says, yeah, that was a great win, but hey, look, I really want to find out a little bit more about your company, what you guys do, how you do it, and what your pricing may be. They just took control. Now, what do? Do you automatically comply and go into an information dump, a presentation about your company? No. You still want to remain in control. And the response, and I'll give you because I get this sometimes, because you got to remember, they're thinking you're there to tell them about your company. You have to let them know that I'm not here to tell you about my company. I'm here to find out if there's a need for what my company does. And if you didn't get a chance to state that in your verbal agenda, then you want to take back control and say something like, hey, Mr. Suspect, remember it's a suspect. Hey, Mr. Suspect, hey, there's not enough time for me to tell you all the facets and value that the company that I work for could bring to you. You may not know it or not, but the purpose of my meeting here today is really to find out very quickly what your needs and concerns are, and then be able to provide a customized solution for you. So let me start by asking you this first question. Okay, so what did you do? You take back control. You didn't let them control the conversation where you take a deep breath and out that dump comes. That's not why you're there. Remember, keep in control. Remain calm. If they control that segue, if they control that transition, you take back control with a statement that basically says, hey, yeah, I could do that, but we're not going to go in that direction right now. There's not enough time for that because I know your time is valuable. Let me share with you what I really would like to accomplish over the next 10, 15 minutes with you. Give that verbal agenda. And then what we're going to talk about here today is, what is your need to know? Because you remember one of the first things I talked about, even when I was doing our tips, is our job is to do two things on this call: ask questions and listen. Listen and ask questions. I gave the analogy of measure twice, cut once. Measure twice, cut once. Save yourself some time. Okay? Find out if you're going to be a good fit and if they're going to be a good fit for you. So I want you to start thinking about, what is my specific area of my need to know? What do I need to know? And I'm going to give you an analogy of something we're all probably familiar with. We've been to the doctor. They have a down pat as far as what their need to know is before they even say anything. Right? What do? You know the drill. You walk in. What's the first thing they ask you? Actually, that's one of the few industries that ask you your ability to pay as soon as you walk in. They want your insurance card. Can you pay? and they're going to get that copay because there's a sign right there. Copay is due right up front, right? I mean, they're making it. There's no bones about it. They're not afraid to talk about money. Okay. Then they're going to update their records. Has anything changed since the last time I was here? Then you're going to sit down for a minute, right? And then when they walk you in the back, they don't take you into the doctor's office. They walk you in the back. They take your height. They take your weight. Then the nurse walks you into another room and they continue what? The assessment. Your vitals. And even when the doctor finally comes in, if you try to interrupt him and say, Doc, what do you think? Well, we still have to run a few more tests. He or she is not going to say anything until they've collected what? All the information that they need. That's why I'm saying, what is your need to know? What do you need to know before you start talking? So over the next couple Mondays, we're going to really do a deep dive in what the need to know really is. And let me just give you a little insight of an area that I start with first. Because I want everybody to think about, especially for our next meeting, what question do you lead with? What's your leading question? How do you jumpstart this conversation? Well, the first thing I want to find out is, I call it problem and then the pains. The problem and then the pains. And we'll talk more about that next Monday. Problem and pain. And let me give you an example of a leading question that I use sometimes. Hey, could you share with me the 2 or 3 reasons that you're looking at conducting some training for your people? And usually what happens is they'll begin sharing some problems with you. Well, what I want to continue to talk about next Monday is, people can live with problems, but it's tough to live with pain. And I'm going to give you a little insight on the question right now. You should be saying to them, after they give you that problem, hey, tell me how that's affecting you. Well, how's that affecting you financially? How's it affecting your team? Because that's where you get the pains. So I want you to start preparing and practicing and get ready for next week, because we're going to spend some time in the next couple of episodes finding out and drilling down what our exact need to know is before you start talking. Make sense? And as always, don't practice these things until you get them right. Let's begin practicing these things enough so we won't get it wrong. Thanks, and make it a great week.